Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, OurScoop.com's podcast. We're on to Season 10, Episode 8. I'm OurScoop.com editor John DeCarlo. We've got Kyle Gauss, OurScoop.com's assistant editor, back with us. And we also have Johnny Zawizlak back.
Hello. Yes,
I mean,
back.
we miss Declan. We love him dearly, but I'm excited to see you guys today.
Excited to see you too. I'm excited to be back. You know, it's always good to be back on the Scoop. Good to be here with Kyle too. I feel like we haven't been on a podcast together in forever.
Who says you can't go home? All right, we're back in our comfort areas. Johnny and I vibing
Kyle,
off.
Tell us about the trip.
What trip? Oh yeah. I was in
What?
I was in the Azores for like a week. That was cool. It's Portugal. They call it the Hawaii of Europe because it's it's volcanic. It's archipelago. It came up from the ocean. It was cool. It was very much like a European experience at times, but a lot of nature, a lot of hiking. And I'm
Is
back.
that how you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it archipelago or is it archipelago?
I think it's archipelago, right?
I literally don't know.
Archipelago?
Archipelago. Is it archipelago?
Archipelago? It might be archipelago. We're not where
I
we
wasn't trying to question. I
call-
literally.
We're not where you would call educated men. I thought you were going to say, is that how you pronounce it, the Azores? Because when I first saw it on paper, I thought it was Azores, but it's the Azores. Yeah, they speak Portuguese. It was fun. It was good times. Hiked through abandoned villages. I went through like an old hotel, which was a 5-star hotel in like the 90s. Now it's just a bunch of like graffiti, and the nature has taken it back over. It was cool.
Wow.
Very
Nice.
cheap once you get there. Not that cheap to get there, but once you get there, it was very cheap. Beers were like €2. It was great.
Johnny, you've been busy with the Phils.
I have been. Yes, it's been very, very, very fun at the ballpark recently.
Best record in baseball, but they got to be playing their best baseball in October.
Exactly.
So I've been told.
It's not the best team that wins; it's the hottest team.
Kyle, there's a Braves question for you later on
Good. They are America's team.
in the mailbag. So
Are they really?
when they're on TBS, they're America's team.
I think they still kind of are because I think the Yankees are too evil to be considered America's team. So I think the Braves just take that over.
I wouldn't call them America's team.
That's because you're 16 years old. They were literally the most popular team in baseball for 30.
I'm 21.
They were on national television every
They're
day.
already spatting again. I love
30
it.
years.
Why
they were
did
on
you
TV
call me 16?
The spark is still there.
They were on TBS until 2003, nationwide every game. So that's why they became like America's team.
But I'm saying like I don't think I like just in like generally now, like sure in 2003 maybe they were, but I don't.
I think if you tier baseball teams, like you do a hierarchy thing, I think you have like Yankees, Dodgers. Then I think the Braves are like the most popular of like the next level. I do.
Yeah,
think.
for that reason, for the TBS reason.
Yeah.
If you weren't, I mean, Kyle knows this is what he was referring to. Like, if you were not a Braves fan, you hated the fact that like they were always on because they were on TBS.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
But is that why we're here today? No, we're not necessarily here to talk baseball.
We're not.
We could.
Yeah, we're not a baseball podcast.
That'd be pretty cool actually. Just completely transform into a baseball podcast and ignore.
You came here expecting Temple football talk. We're going to go into the history of broadcasting
I
rights.
say we go further into it, we become like a Love Island podcast or something. We just like really dedicate a portion of our podcast to reality.
We send Declan out there to see how he does.
Declan wins
You
Love
do
Island.
pretty well.
You think so?
I think so.
What if we sent you out there too? I got to get home. There's a game tomorrow.
That's probably what I
I
would
think
say.
you're great and everything.
Vote me off the island.
I've never
I
seen an
think that's how
episode of
that
Love
works.
Island. How do you win Love Island?
I've seen like one episode and it was like I couldn't even tell you what was happening. I just know that they're all trying to
not
like
sure.
find a date or whatever. I've maybe I'm offending some people and
No,
not.
that's as much as I know too.
So I don't know if there's necessarily a winner. I know that like
I think there's a winner. I
Is
believe
there?
I believe somebody wins. Yes. Oh, the public votes for their favorite Islanders to stay in the villa. New Islanders enter the villa. That's nice. The public votes one last time, so it's a popularities contest at the end.
oh okay.
I think Declan wins.
Yeah, I do think Declan would be able to win a popularity
He
contest.
comes back a changed man.
He would never let any of us hear the end of it if he
Yeah.
won Love Island.
Dude, neither would I. If you
I mean,
won
fair.
television-
Again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying like Declan would be over the top with it, and rightfully so.
Anyway, the Owls are now 0-3 after losing to Coastal Carolina. They finally showed some signs of life on offense, and those of you who wanted to change a quarterback, you got your wish on Saturday. We'll break down Evan Simon's performance, preview Saturday's Utah State game. We'll recap an important men's basketball recruiting weekend, and of course, get to all of your mailbag questions. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you have been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win. So in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. That's greenspans-law.com. Did anybody prepare an honor around this date with Declan not being here?
Oh, you bet your butt I did.
Oh, snap.
Attaboy.
September 17th is the day this comes out, right? Yes.
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 I have quite a few.
Okay.
I'm going to eliminate one actually right now because I think it might be a little controversial, so I'm not going to read that one. So I'm down to quite a few minus one.
Quite a few.
Okay. In 1961, this arena became the first sports arena in the world with a retractable roof. And it opened up.
1961.
I'm going to give a hint. John is probably aware of this arena.
1961 retractable roof? Why am I drawing a blank on this? It was not the Astrodome.
The Mellon Arena, which was later known as the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh.
Oh wow, I forgot about that.
They opened the roof with that thing by like 40 individual trucks had to be driven individually at the same time to open up the roof.
But I can't think of. But here's the thing, though: it's not a baseball stadium.
No,
it's where the Penguins play, and it's where the Pittsburgh Spirit, their I don't know if it was MLS back then.
Well, it's gone now, right?
Yeah, it's gone. But I can't think of why that needed to have a retractable roof. And I lived there in the 80s. I can't remember I can't remember a time where they opened it.
Let's find out, shall we? Okay, let's see here. Who else played there?
I was just trying to think baseball stadiums, but I couldn't.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. For our 412 and 724 area code listeners.
42 trucks. They got opened for a fireworks show in 1995. A film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. In an film set.
Oh, Jean-Claude Van Damme. I forget.
Sudden Death.
Yeah, Sudden Death.
Yeah, I don't know.
And he was in a Penguins game in that movie.
Yeah, they fired fireworks up. I don't know why they made it a retractable thing because you're right. I mean, it was just kind of like the Penguins. Like Duquesne played there a little bit.
Yeah,
but they did. It was a retractable roof.
That's a hell of a start.
Equally important, in 1944, Allied paratroopers dropped into the Netherlands as part of this World War II famous operation. Operation Market Garden. Very popular, very famous.
Never going to get that.
In 2013, Johnny was alive during this one. In 2013, this video game was released and would go on to be the second highest selling video game of all time.
2013, second highest video.
I'm deferring to you on this one. I haven't played
it. Hint, it has a sequel coming out next year.
Oh, GTA. GTA, which one though? Of 5, okay.
People call Grand Theft Auto GTA?
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm just
GTA 5.
I'm out
of 2 birthdays. This reliever, primarily associated with the Mets, pitched over the course of 3 decades and finished his career with 424 saves.
John Franco?
John Franco.
All right.
Yeah.
Last but certainly not least, forever in our hearts, this actor, known for his roles in TV shows Three's Company and 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, as well as the movies Problem Child and Problem Child 2.
Oh, come on. What?
Was born on this day.
Never saw a single one of those.
I know it's why I should not be blanking on this name. I see the face.
It's right
I'll
there.
give you a hint. It's the same first name as the last answer, which is also your name.
It's John. It's John. Wait, it's
both of your names.
Yes.
What the hell is his last name? I see the face.
There is a hall at Temple with the same name and an annex.
Oh, John Ritter. John Ritter.
Yes.
There we go. There we go.
And that was on this date, September 17th.
Those were some good questions, Kyle.
How about that Coastal Carolina loss, guys? So Temple loses to Coastal Carolina. They're 0-3 now. Depending on how you want to look at this Temple football season, you could be, I mean, bottom line is they lost 28-20. The team's 0-3. We talked prior to the start of the season that, you know, the Oklahoma game we expected to be a loss. And then we looked at this stretch of non-conference games and thought the Navy's, well, sorry, Navy's not a non-conference game, but we thought the Navy game would be winnable. They lost. Thought the Coastal Carolina game would be winnable. They lost. Utah State's coming up this Saturday. We'll get to them in a little bit. Then you've got Army, UConn, before you really get in the thick of conference play. Depending on how you want to look at this one, again, 0-3 is 0-3. Are you maybe encouraged that they play a little bit better on offense? Okay, the good, Evan Simon gets the start because Forrest Brock was day-to-day. Stan Drayton did say, and we're recording this on Monday afternoon, Stan Drayton did say about an hour and a half ago, not 90 minutes ago, that he hasn't named a starter for this week, so we'll get that out of the way now. He did later say that Forrest Brock was throwing at the end of last week. It was a wrist contusion, but Evan Simon got the start, and that became apparent once Forrest Brock was not warming up pregame. So the good, Evan Simon showed you something, showed you some experience. Stan Drayton has used the word moxie about a half dozen times. He went 17-25 for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have that the interception that was deflected at the line, taken back for a pick 6. Showed he could move around a little bit, showed he could throw on the run out of the pocket. Temple did score on all 3 of their trips in the red zone. They had 314 yards of total offense. Some teams do that in a half if they're in a non-conference game, but we're talking about a Temple team that's trying to find any identity. The bad, of course, that fourth down play at the end where Stan Drayton said he wasn't sure if Evan Simon knew it was fourth down. Stan was asked about that again today. He did say that Evan did say he knew it was fourth down, just made the wrong throw at the wrong time. So, and the other more of the bad, through 3 games, Temple still has not forced a turnover. They're dead last in the country at -11 in turnover margin. I mean, beyond the obvious stuff, just general takeaways from this game. Did you guys see anything that would lead you to believe that I think we can say we saw some things that would lead to believe that they could potentially be headed in the right direction. But again, 0-3 is 0-3. How do you feel after this game as compared to the other 2 losses?
I think my initial thoughts are the offense obviously early on did not look great with Simon, but I think as the game progressed, he got more comfortable. And I think my biggest thing with him is that he seems a lot more comfortable with pressure against the blitz and seems like he's able to process the game a little bit slower than Forrest was, which is expected. Simon's more experienced, but I think if you're Stan Drayton in your Temple and you're trying to win football games, you need to have someone that's out there comfortable against stuff like that. And I think he kind of showed that when it comes to stuff that's positive. I mean, I guess like you said, there are some signs of it. They were able to move the ball in the second half. I think that's their offense is capable of doing that. But there are some positives with Temple. But I find it hard to believe when going against Utah State that they can. I mean, that's another team that's had some ups and downs in a tough offseason, though.
Kyle, thoughts after Saturday?
Yeah, to kind of echo what Johnny said, I mean, I think Evan Simon looked good while under pressure. He was 10 of 12 when Coastal Carolina blitzed, including his touchdown. So he had the ability to kind of diagnose and make the right throw at the right time. I'm not optimistic. I wouldn't say I'm an optimistic person about this Temple season, but like I do think you can make the argument that Coastal Carolina is probably for the remainder of Temple's schedule, like the second or third best team they're going to play. Like I really, again, I want to hammer home how weak this Temple schedule is at certain points. So like the fact that they were resilient, I will say one thing to Stan Drayton's credit is this team has not quit on him. I do think they're like legitimately still playing hard for this coaching staff. 5 turnovers in the last 17 games. They forced 5 turnovers in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's unbelievable. I mean, they had more than they've had games themselves where they've turned the ball over more than 5 times, and they do it in one and a half years. It takes that long. So I do think the defense actually played pretty well. Like you can pretty much take away like 14 points based upon like Evan Simon's pick 6 and that fumble deep in their own territory. Like if you're saying, okay, the defense only gave up 14, even 21 points against a Coastal Carolina team that historically is a pretty good offensive program, like that's a good performance on their end, and that'll travel well. I don't necessarily think the offense is all of a sudden fixed with Evan Simon, like some people are projecting on Twitter and stuff like that. Like it's still they scored 20 points. They had 300 and some yards of offense. Like were they better? Sure. Were they able to run the ball? Yeah, a little bit. Like they ran it a little bit. They had 130 yards rushing. Like I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think a lot of it's just people were looking for any type of change, and they got their wish. If I was a betting man, we can get into the Utah State thing a little bit. If I was a betting man, I would wager Evan Simon probably starts against Utah State.
Yeah, I would too.
My guys, you kind of ride that hot hand, but maybe Navy's better than we thought. Maybe Coastal Carolina is not as good as we think they're going to be. Maybe there's some in betweens there, but I still think that Temple can beat Utah State. They can beat Tulsa. They can beat UConn. Like there's still opportunities for wins on this schedule.
And this is a quote that I'm reading from, again, about 90 minutes ago. Stan said, "We're going to play the guy that's ready to play, who has the best week of preparation between the two. But right now, Forrest is day to day." Again, at the end of his press conference, he did say at the end of his presser that Brock was throwing the ball at the end of last week. Again, there are times where, on one hand, he would say, Forrest won the job for a reason. But again, he must have brought up Evan Simon's experience and moxie several times. I think he probably has a good idea of who's going to start. I think he's doing this for a couple of reasons. Somebody on Twitter just responded and said, "I hope this is just coach speak." Yeah, it probably is. He knows in reality that both of these guys have their flaws. He doesn't want either one of them to get settled in or get complacent. I don't know that it's in the nature of either guy to get settled in and complacent. And if one of these guys had won the job outright coming out of the spring, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I think he's, they're 0-3. People might find it to be a little silly, but he is probably looking for any competitive advantage he can, even though you now have 2 weeks of tape on Forrest Brock. You have a week of tape on Evan Simon, plus anything he did at Rutgers. So these guys are no longer unknown commodities. Kyle, I would agree with you. I think if I were a betting man, I would lean on Evan Simon as well.
I just want to hammer with you. I think there's people have trouble sometimes processing that college is a lot different than the NFL. And like in the NFL, you can legitimately be like, look, we're repping kind of both these quarterbacks. We're seeing who's going to be better. We're going to make a decision Wednesday, Thursday. And we're going to figure out who's going on Sunday. College football with starting quarterbacks, that decision's probably already been made.
Yep.
It's going to be made like today or not tomorrow because there's such a small amount of practice that they're allowed to do during the week that like you can't get two guys ready. You have to go with one of them. So if there's any ambiguity, if there's any, is this guy going to be ready? Like odds are it's going to be the other guy.
Speaking of quarterbacks, and I want to, we'll jump to some audio in a second, talking about the turnover margin, lack of focus. Johnny asked a really good question today, basically saying like, you're talking about lack of focus. What? Essentially, you didn't say it like this bluntly, but like we're 3 weeks in, where's that lack of focus coming from? But there was a mailbag question we got last week, and I forget who asked the question. I apologize, but they said, I'm starting to think it's the coaching and the play calling. I'm not trying to pile on the guy, but if we looked at what EJ Warner's doing at Rice, now granted, it came against Houston, but look at what he's done in the first few weeks down there. He got benched this past Saturday.
True freshman.
I think you can say that Danny Langsdorff did a pretty good job calling games, scheming the offense around him. It's in the same conference.
Yeah.
And things are not off to the best start down there at Rice. I don't know about the line that's playing in front of him, but he has not put up great numbers. So.
I believe it's bad. My gut would tell me it's a bad offensive line down there as well.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get to this. These are a couple pieces of audio. Johnny and I didn't necessarily ask these questions back to back. I don't think we did, but Johnny asked him about the lack of focus. And then later I asked Stan, about the turnover margin. I said, is that lack of focus part of it? Again, like, you'll hear me asking them, are there times where like you had an opportunity to punch the ball out and you didn't, or jump a route and you didn't? Because again, 17 over 5 turnovers for us over the last 17 games, Kyle. Is that what
5 turnovers, 17 games? Yeah, going back to the last 2 weeks of the 2022 season.
Yeah, and if you're looking at, again, I know so many things are different now. Matt Rule and Jeff Collins were not dealing with the portal and NIL, but when Temple football got better, it was because they started to handle sudden change better, and they could force turnovers and they could force these game-changing moments. And that has unfortunately been a signature piece of the Stan Drayton era in a not so good way, is that they haven't handled sudden change better. Again, I'll give him his first season where he was really cleaning up bad recruiting under Rod Carey. But the turnover margin being worse than the nation, that continues. So here's Stan talking about answering Johnny's question about lack of focus, and then me following up later and saying, is that hurting you when it comes to forcing turnovers?
You opened up with talking about the lack of focus being a big contributor. What is the
what is contributing to that kind of lack of focus? Is it discipline? Is it lack of experience?
That's a great question. It's a lot of variables that go into losing focus. It can be, miscommunication. It can be, you're on the edge and you feel like the clock's against you and you got to find a way to win, and then you step outside your job description and do something that you're not supposed to do, trying to make a play. And we have very competitive football players. That's kind of been the common denominator, is they see things kind of not going their way. It's not like they're flinching, but they're trying to make a play. And sometimes they step outside their job description. Well, that's losing focus. And we've had a lot of examples that we should be learning from at this point, that when we do that, things don't necessarily go our way. It's not going according to plan that way. So, no, it's about staying true to your coaching, staying true to your job description. Fatigue will play into that from sometimes, but again, when you have a larger purpose, you can't let fatigue get in the way, so it's a mindset. It really is a mindset to stay focused. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is required if we're going to win football games here at Temple. And that's football.
When you talk about the focus stuff, does that play into turnover margin? You guys are last in the country there, 3 weeks in. When you guys look at film, have you seen examples where like a guy's carrying the ball and saying, hey, we could have punched it out there, or we could have made a play there and jumped the route?
Absolutely. It's to the point now, where if those guys do not buy into the way we're teaching them to carry the football, and things of that sort, then they won't play.
What about on defense? So do you see opportunities where they've had the chance to where you guys have had the chance to knock the ball out, or just like jump a route, like just to create turnovers on defense?
Absolutely, but you got to get your guys in the right place. They need to be doing exactly what's being coached so they can put themselves in position to make those kind of plays. And there's plenty of opportunities out there, and we're definitely locked in and focused on it. You hear our coaches coaching it, you hear our players repeating it. Again, when you lose focus and you get yourself out of position and you're behind the ball, those are tough times to get that done. So let's get our job done first, and those opportunities will present themselves.
All right, so let's look at this Utah State team that they're playing Saturday at 2 p.m. Kyle, I'm kind of with you. On one hand, they played Utah tough this past weekend. They were up on them 14-3 on the 12th ranked team in the country. They're 1-2. Their top running back is a game named Razul Faison, who Stan mentioned today that he's from Pottstown. He's got an interesting story in that he originally went to Salisbury High School in Connecticut, then went to Lackawanna College, then Marshall, then Snow College, and then on to Utah State. Kyle, I don't know if you saw this in the script beforehand. His cousin is one of the better defensive players in the history of the Temple program. Do you know who it is?
No, I have no idea.
He played linebacker. Ward number 17, I believe. He played at Temple before you were ever a student here or covered the program.
And he's just a name on my Excel sheet.
Ryan Wallace. He's Ryan Wallace's cousin.
Played with the Steelers.
Yep. Yeah. So he had 115 yards on 19 carries against Utah. He's averaging 6.2 yards per carry. Hasn't gotten into the end zone yet, but a good back that they're going to be mindful of. Bryson Barnes, 524 yards, 4 TDs, and 4 picks through the first 3 games. He was at Utah last year, so an interesting transfer from Utah to Utah State. Does have 2 rushing touchdowns this season, 1 against Utah last week. Had good numbers against Robert Morris. They beat Robert Morris in their opener, so it was an FCS game. Had 265 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground at Utah last year. So he's a guy, another somewhat mobile to decently mobile quarterback that they're going to have to be mindful of. So he had 2 touchdowns and 2 picks in the Utah loss. Their receivers, their 2 leading receivers, Jalen Royals and Kyrese White, are shorter guys. They have a big target in Otto Tia. He's a 6'4" receiver, right? Those are some of the names to look out for on offense through 3 games.
Dude, I think we're bearing the lead a little bit.
What?
Did we mention their defense? Who's standing out on their defense? Clyde Washington, former Temple commit from Medford.
Oh, wow.
Signed with Purdue. He was one of the guys that when Fran first came back.
I forgot about him.
I think when his dad played at Purdue, or his grandpa did. When Fran first came back, he was like the first commit of Fran coming back. And then when Fran went to Rutgers, he flipped. Yeah, Clyde Washington has 20 tackles so far. He led them against Utah. In fairness, if people are looking at that Utah box scoring going, wow, they lost by 17 to the number 12 team. Utah didn't have Cam Rising. Like they were starting their backup quarterback there. They still managed to put 38 points against the Utah State team. Like I don't think it was a full strength Utah team probably wins that game.
Yeah. I was thinking of, I was checking to see if Colin Vaughn has played. He's the JUCO player who committed to Temple and then flipped to Utah State over the summer. He played briefly against Robert Morris, but hasn't played since. Kyle, I forgot about him. I forgot that he was a Temple verbal.
Yeah, I remember where I interviewed him for. You know, like occasionally you'll have like a random like memory of like I know exactly where I was when this happened. For something that's pretty inconsequential. Like this kid was committed to Temple for like 2 months. And I remember exactly where I was when he committed and where I interviewed him.
Yeah. Their defense getting 3 takeaways through 3 games. Jordan Vincent, one of their safeties, is their leading tackler, has 32 tackles, has one of their interceptions, which came this past weekend against Utah. Started off at Eastern Illinois, then New Mexico State, which is, a trend that you're starting to see now with the portal guys playing at multiple schools. Played at Stevenson High School in Illinois, at the same place as this former guard whose decisions and those of a certain member of his family changed the course of the Temple basketball program. Who played at Stevenson High School, Johnny? Kyle knows this, but I'm going to ask you.
I do not know.
Makes a lot of money for the New York Knicks now.
Brunson?
Yes, Jalen Brunson.
Jalen Brunson.
To Stevenson High School.
Who was his teammate that Temple also offered?
Oh, good question. Good question. And his name is currently escaping me. I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. I remember it became a thing of they were like, oh no, we would take him too, like just on his own.
Was on point today.
Yeah.
Fresh
I'll
coming.
give you a hint. It's an alliterative name.
I'm not going to get it. You're going to say the name and it's going to sound familiar to me.
Connor Cashaw.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He ended up playing at, like Rice. So like he was like a D1 level guy, but he played at Creighton and Rice. So good for him.
Kyle, let me ask you this, and maybe it's along the lines of what I'm thinking. Again, Temple's 0-3.
0-3 for the first time since 2013.
Yeah. So, and yet, I still feel the same way you do in that I don't look at Temple. Again, there's a lot to not like about how Temple has started off the season. We've talked about a lot of it. Stan saw some good things out of Evan Simon, still wants to see if the best man, so to speak, is going to win the starting quarterback job. They are dead last in the country in turnover margin. We've talked about the bad numbers there. And yet I'm looking at this Utah State team, and again, they're 1-2. Kyle rightly pointed out that Utah was shorthanded. I don't know which way I'm going to lean, even though we're a few minutes from making a prediction, but I still don't look at them and say like, this is like, I still think this is a winnable game for Temple. So Kyle, I'll start with you too. What do they have to do beyond some of the obvious stuff? Why? I'll ask you this first. Why do you think they can win on Saturday, and what do they need to do to win on Saturday?
The reasons I think they can win come down a lot to maybe not even a football thing. Just imagine if you close your eyes, a 1-2 Mountain West team traveling across the country to play in a relatively empty stadium against a team it's never played before and will only play one more time in its history. That sets itself up for a potential loss. Like it's such a weird environment for Utah State to do. Like they're not like, yeah, okay, it's a homecoming for Faison. But other than that, like most of these guys have probably never been to the East Coast. They just came down from probably an emotional letdown. Like they played their rival in Utah. They were right in it until halftime, and then Utah just kind of pulls away. That's probably a bit of an emotional, like deflating loss. And then they're about to get into like their conference play. I can see them kind of looking past Temple. Like Vegas says this is a 6.5 point underdog for Temple. That feels right, but that also tells me that like Temple's firmly in this game if they're only 6.5 point dogs.
That's an interesting line. I hadn't looked at the line yet. What if you said close your eyes for a second? What if you looked out onto your camera and Zoom and Johnny and I were both just sitting here with our eyes closed?
I mean, I was hoping you would close your eyes for a second. But when I tell you things, I mean it literally. Please.
From now on, Kyle, I'll take everything you say literally.
Oh God,
So,
that's not good.
Johnny, you in particular should take everything I say with a grain of salt. Because when I say mean things to you, I never mean them as actually mean. But sometimes
you don't make that very clear.
You guys have got to work this out.
I'm just speaking my truth to Kyle. I'm not gonna
take it from me. Like I said, there've been a couple road trips we've been on where Kyle's just singing me with jokes, and then I hear, and he does the heart.
Yeah, Johnny takes him a little close to heart, so that it makes it I'm not defending myself, but it makes it easier to.
It sounds like you're defending yourself.
Easier to determine who to target if one's giving you that reaction.
I enjoy giving that reaction because I feel like it makes you feel validated.
Oh yeah, that's appreciated for sure. Oh yeah, for sure. Like if I wasn't getting anything, then yeah, that would be the like middle school bully thing where it's like just ignore them and they'll go away. I don't want to go away, Johnny.
Exactly. And
What's-
I realized that, and no one else was giving you that reaction, so I felt like I had to take it upon myself
Whew,
to give that
nobody else.
reaction.
Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page. I think our
Yeah,
relationship will continue down this.
it's been pretty good. I don't know why you paint this as like some terrible, like
Well,
unhealthy
sometimes I
relationship.
think that you like. I hope what I'm trying to do relay to you is I hope you know that like I don't dislike you. Like that's not a thing where I'm trying to like dogpile on you. I'm just poking.
I'm just pot stirring. That's all I'm
Yeah,
doing. I'm
John,
stirring
as your
pot.
advisor, mentor, and person
Yeah,
you're
I feel like that's kind of crazy.
yeah,
You're the
you
advisor and mentor, and you're trying to paint this relationship as some
huh?
terrible,
It's pot stirring.
unhealthy.
We're having fun.
You are the bad guy here, not me.
Okay, okay, Kyle, hold on. Hold on. You can't just pivot like that. You can't push all the blame onto John.
Anyway, 119th in scoring defense, 117th in rushing defense, 120th in total defense. Like this is not a good Utah State defense. Yes, they
Right.
played USC. Yes, they played Utah. Like Temple at home should be able to, if you can copy and I'll put it this way. I think if you can copy and paste the performance you had against Coastal Carolina on both sides of the ball, I think they win this game.
Yeah. Johnny, agree, disagree with that?
I would relatively agree. I think the turnovers from the offense have to you can't you got to focus on not turning over the ball and
Just
giving
another fumble deep in their own territory. Like, yeah.
like you're just giving up free like this defense. I agree. Like while like we've been talking about the not being able to force turnovers, like other than that, this defense I think has been relatively like surprisingly good this year, and I think like if Temple's offense can focus on not turning over the football and putting the defense in
They were not good against Navy, we should say. They were
not
bad.
yes, not good against Navy, but the Oklahoma game they showed flashes, and Coastal Carolina game I think they were pretty good.
Coastal comes in averaging 500 yards a game. They hold them to 287.
Mhm.
That's yes, and I think if the offense can not turn the ball over and put the defense the opposing offense already in positive situations, I think that's where you have to start. And if the offense can focus on taking care of the ball and also moving the ball downfield and sustaining long drives too, because I think that's another issue that we've seen. They haven't really been able to sustain long drives other than later on in that Coastal Carolina game. They were finally able to do that, and look where that got them. They kept them in the game, I think. But overall, I mean, I the 6.5 point underdog thing, I thought it would have been higher going into it. So I guess that is something there. I think that they have a chance to be able to be in this game, and I mean, who knows? Like if Evan Simon makes a good throw at the end of that game on that fourth down, maybe we're talking about a completely different scenario. So maybe if they're in that situation again, they can find a way to make the right play. But obviously, I know we're coming right up on the prediction part of the podcast here, so I'll save it for then. But I'm still not optimistic going into it.
Yeah, real quick before we even get to the predictions, just a couple of roster updates to pass along. I did ask about Dewan Black and Zay Baines. So Stan said they have one more week to get through, and then they will be available after next week. So that projects out that they were both slated to miss the first 4 games. So we'll see how much Zay Baines contributes on offense after this week. Certainly they could use Dewan Black's help. All right, let's get to predictions. Kyle, I'll go with you first.
I don't know if I hinted at this or not in my previous. I kind of just get the feeling like, look, I don't think Temple's a good football team. I don't think all of a sudden they're going to be 6-6 or 7-5 or something. I don't think they're an 0-12 team or anything like that. I think they still have the potential to like kind of redeem themselves to a little bit of respectability. And I think in order for that to happen, it needs to happen this week. I think Evan Simon starts. I think they continue to do like a run, like they want to run the ball first. I think ideally they'd like to get 150 rushing yards and just keep Evan Simon to 20, 22 pass attempts. I think they get a little bit of success on that. I think they win this game 24-21.
Johnny?
I'm gonna say I had the exact same score but flipped around. I had 24-21 Utah State. I think Temple is able to keep this game really close. Like Kyle mentioned, they're gonna try and focus on the run, sustain drives, keep the ball in their hands, and I think it's gonna be one of those things where Temple has the game tied, but Utah State drives down and hits a game-winning field goal towards the end, and that kind of seals it for Temple. I think it's going to be another one of those games where maybe they have a turnover or two, aren't able to hold on to the ball, and Utah State's able to capitalize 1 or 2 times. And I think that's kind of where they're. And then Temple, obviously, I'm not confident in the defense being able to force a turnover in because they haven't been able to do it in 17. They've only done it 5 times in 17 games. So I think Temple's going to lose 24-21.
I've got a 31-28 Temple win.
Wow.
I think Maddox Trujillo is going to hit a 50-yarder last play of the game. I'm like Kyle. I think he nailed it. I don't think they're a 6-win team, but I also don't think they're an 0-12 team. I think for all the reasons he outlined, the travel, some of their flaws that have shown up statistically, and just watching some plays from the Utah game. Again, my prediction record, I think I correctly predicted a loss at Oklahoma. Anybody could have done that. I think I predicted a win at Navy.
Yeah.
I think I'm 2-1 on predictions.
Did you predict Coastal to beat Temple or win?
I think I predicted a Coastal win. But I see them winning 31-28. I think they can win this game. That is not me bright siding the last 3 weeks of football. They still have a ton of flaws. But I think that they can win. Before we get to the mailbag, let's recap what was an important basketball recruiting weekend for Adam Fisher as program. As we first reported last week, Perkiomen School point guard KJ Cochran came in for his official visit. He was at Duquesne the weekend prior, was at Temple this past weekend, along with his close friend, Cam Wallace. So Cam Wallace, of course, verbal to Temple several weeks ago, but had still not taken his official visit. So they're close friends. Source familiar with KJ's recruitment told me that he could maybe see KJ canceling his Boise State visit, but he's visiting Santa Clara, I believe, this coming weekend. If I had to venture a guess, I would say it's probably going to come down to Temple and Santa Clara. So obviously would be a big pickup for Temple. They have another visitor coming in this coming weekend. Again, if you are an owlscoop.com subscriber, you're already clued in on that. If you haven't subscribed yet, now will be a good time. So another visitor coming in this weekend. So next few weeks will definitely be interesting for the men's program. As always, before we answer your mailbag questions, we play our weekly tip from Mike Greenspan. So here is Mike's tip this week about staying safe on the road.
Did you know that some of the most dangerous times to be out on the road are not during the day, but instead between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.? Why is that? Well, take a look at the news. Do you notice when you see the reports of these terrible crashes, they're often occurring at night? Why? Because that's when you'll encounter more often drunk drivers or drowsy drivers or people who are just doing things they shouldn't be doing. And that's why you see these wrong way collisions, people crossing over a double yellow line. Temple fans, be safe. If you can, try to avoid traveling between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Arrive alive.
All right, let's get to the mailbag here. First mailbag question comes from the screen name of Temple fan Al from the owlscoop.com message boards. The question there, our O-line is banged up once again, feels like deja vu. Who is to blame for all of these injuries? Also, our tackles seem unprepared. Who's to blame for that? Talent or coaching? Is it both? Who's to blame for all these injuries? I feel like these are injuries that can come up. Now, the Kevin Terry injury is just a fluke thing. According to Stan, he twisted his ankle on the way to class Friday. So again, you could say that's classic Temple bad luck, but you can't blame the coaches for that. All things considered. Now, Luke Watson, I asked for an update on Luke Watson today, and Stan just said, again, that's going to be a while. So that's I've heard a couple things on the specifics of his injury. I don't know for sure. Can't really confirm it, but that's the one significant injury they have. The other guys like Kevin Terry and Wisdom Quarshie, Stan said today, are day to day. But 3 weeks into the season, they've been able to play. They played all the same 5 guys. I haven't seen the snap counts yet. So all 5 guys played every snap, right?
Correct.
So 3 weeks in a row now to open the season. They are a hell of a lot healthier than they were. So I don't know, Temple fan, that anybody's to blame for the injuries. They have new turf that was well overdue.
Right.
The tackles seem unprepared. I mean, Kevin Terry is a redshirt freshman. Melvin Siani is a redshirt freshman. I asked Stan about that, and we'll have the entire audio of today's session up on the site. But I asked Stan, and his answer was it depends on the penalty you're talking about. I said, so when you look at your tackles, are they essentially making redshirt freshman mistakes, or are they making glaring mistakes? And his answer was somewhere right in the middle.
Yeah.
Again, the offensive line could play better. They could be more experienced. One guy that has not really made it into the rotation that they seemed high on when they signed him was Mausapalu. He has not played any snaps at guard. They seemed to like what they saw from Eric King, redshirt freshman, play guard this week. So I get it. They're 0-3. 0-3 is 0-3 is 0-3. But I think this offensive line, you're playing a lot of younger guys. Wisdom Quarshie's the grad student. James Faminu got benched, right? James wasn't hurt.
Yeah,
Right?
he got benched for Eric King. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the offensive line is in a better place. Could they be run blocking and pass blocking better? Absolutely. But I don't know that anyone's to blame for all these injuries. These are, again, to recap, the Kevin Terry injury is a fluke. They otherwise, Luke Watson is out for a while. Injuries happen. I don't know that there's a blame game to be played here, other than the fact that some of them are just young. Yes, they need to play better. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to this one.
No, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, injuries. I mean, it's football. There's gonna be injuries sometimes. It's just kind of how it goes. And like you mentioned, there's inexperience there on the line, so you're gonna see growing pains.
Kyle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. I'm not gonna go into your
Very good talk show. Yeah.
Barry talk thing. Yeah, I mean, I think Eric King, like you said,
right down. Johnny's like, hey, he's not ganging up on me. Go ahead.
No, like the Kevin Terry fluke thing. Eric King legitimately surpassed James Faminu. Wisdom Quarshie has honestly, until this point in his career, kind of been a stalwart health wise. Like I can't remember any game off the top of my head that Wisdom Quarshie wasn't like available for going into this. I think this is kind of like when they talked about how they have a lot more depth. This is a result of that, because if this was last year, you start seeing look, they started the walk on last year at guard. They had situations where they didn't have the full guys out there, and they were forced to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel to just put a lineup out. So I don't think it's been an issue yet. And honestly, other than the penalty against Siani, I think Siani played pretty well. I think Eric King played pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Diego Barajas, they were really high on a year ago. So I think, he's kind of gotten left by some of the younger guys, but maybe he has an opportunity here now to maybe still carve out a role for himself. So I don't think it's too early on to be like, well, this is an epidemic and now we need to figure out the root of all this. I think this is kind of just, football. People get hurt.
They even seem to be getting a little bit more out of a guy that's, I hate, as much as I hate saying this, not one of their guys, Jackson Pruitt, a broad carry recruit. I mean, still playing some meaningful snaps for him. So
he's what, redshirt sophomore?
Yep. Yeah.
That's still pretty early in your football career.
Yeah. Next question here from the screen name Temple Owls alum 1620. It's been just one game, but the offense seemed to take a major step forward with Evan Simon, a quarterback. Take us into your thoughts on what you think the decision was to stick with Forrest Brock for 2 games, given the performance of the offense, and how does this relate to Stan's first year with choosing Dwan Mathis over EJ Warner? A common theme or not fair to compare, assuming they go with Simon moving forward. So a couple things here. Yeah, the Dwan Mathis over EJ Warner, completely different. I think by then, at that point, you're still hoping that you can get anything out of a former 5-star quarterback, and you think, okay, this kid's bounced around. Maybe we are the staff that can get something out of them. They liked EJ. They kept saying, hey, he can sling it. He's thrown the ball really well, but he's still a true freshman. With Dwan, I think they reached the point where he's making mistakes against Lafayette, and they're like, that's it. We've seen enough. You have the ability. You should know better. It's time to give EJ a shot. What do we have to lose? I think this is a completely different situation. I'm going to play some audio here because I really wanted to ask Stan about this today. This is a great question. So a lot of times, I don't want to say a lot of times, but I'm almost positive I talked to Adam DeMichael about this. Now, Adam DeMichael and Vaughn Charlton, Jesus, I forgot his name.
Oh, yeah.
They bounced back and forth. Now, both those guys dealt with injuries. Adam certainly did. I've talked to Adam before about how some guys, again, when I say this, I'm not saying that Evan Simon is on his way to passing for 4,000 yards this year and becoming a future NFL draft pick, but there are some guys who don't practice as well as they play when the lights come on or when the sun comes out at noon or 2 p.m. And I asked Stan today, like I said, essentially, look, there was a reason why, and he said it. This was one of the things when Stan was skillfully going back and forth today, saying like, well, Evan gives us a lot of moxie. He's got that experience. He's a calming force in the huddle. But then he would say, but there's there's a reason why Forrest won the job, which I don't think is heading into this week. Yes, it's coach speak, but I think it's also telling the truth in that I do think there was a reason why he won the job. If you were to sit in on the limited 2 full spring practices that we saw, Forrest Brock looked like he threw a better ball than Evan Simon.
Yeah.
But those are 2 practices. So I asked Stan, I said, look, you've talked about his moxie, you've talked about his grit, you've talked about his experience. Is Evan kind of just one of those guys that when you throw him in there, he's plays better on game day than he does in practice? And this is what Stan had to say.
Good quarterback sometimes, obviously, there was something that Forrest showed you to have him start, and he beat out Evan. You mentioned that Evan gets in and he shows some moxie. Is Evan a guy that sometimes, like, because of the experience, does he play better than he practices?
Yeah, well, he just doesn't flinch under pressure. That's the thing that you notice with Evan. I mean, he's been there before. There hasn't been a whole lot that he hasn't seen and hasn't experienced. So that piece of it, he's that calming force for the offense when things may be kind of going sideways, that he can reel them in and reset the whole mindset of that offense. And that's huge. Sometimes that's all you need when you got, a surrounding cast that has an intentional thought process about getting their job done. So, he was good for us this week in that respect.
So I think that could be part of it. Again, we know, we've talked about before in this pod, they looked for quarterback help in the portal. They did not come out of the spring and say, we're good. We are good. Evan Simon is our clear number 1. Forrest Brock is our clear number 2. We're bringing in Chris Dietrich. We really like him. We're excited about Tyler Douglas. Again, I'm not trying to pick on Tyler. He's a redshirt freshman, but they absolutely pursued help in the portal. They didn't get it. But I think that these things happen. I get it. I've said it a million times. Again, they're 0-3. Fans are ticked. They're pissed off. I get it. They should not be happy with an 0-3 record, and they want to pin everything on the quarterback. I think this is just one of those things where they thought they were making the right decision. We'll see how Evan Simon does. I'm with Kyle. I'll be surprised if he's not the starter on Saturday. And I said it earlier in the show, I think that Danny Langsdorff is a pretty solid offensive coordinator. I would like to see what Evan Simon could do under a full season under Danny. And I have no doubt that there was a reason why he didn't win the job coming out of the spring, coming out of preseason camp. But again, you heard Stan there. So maybe he is the type of guy who, like, he gets in there, some instincts take over. I think that's what's at play here, but I would not compare it at all to the Dwan Mathis and EJ Warner thing. Kyle, anything you want to add in here, Johnny?
Yeah, the other comparison that comes to mind with me is Frank Nutile, Logan Marchi, where same thing. You kind of hear throughout all of it that, Logan might have the inside track. He starts the first couple games in 2017. Yeah. And then Nutile takes over because Logan dings up his leg and then just never gives it back. Like, the old cliche is you don't lose your job due to injury, but, like, you can at quarterback. That's definitely possible. Like, you ride the hot hand. I also just think to, like, the question of, well, why now? Why wait so long? Like, why didn't you make that move halfway through Navy? I think, like, you ran the risk of, but not losing the locker room, but potentially kind of like damaging your relationships with other players. If you're like, hey, we had that whole off season, we've been competing for 9 months, blah, blah. And really, I'm giving you like half a game. And then I'm going to pull the trigger. Because, like, Oklahoma was Oklahoma. They were never going to look good against that. If you had gone to Evan Simon after a half against Navy, you'd be like, cool, that's 9 months of work for, I gave you 30 minutes to prove yourself. And you need to let players be comfortable enough to fail in order for them to be comfortable enough to succeed. So, like, I think you needed to give Forrest Brock as much of an opportunity as you can. That's not to say, like, that Evan Simon doesn't go out this week, stink, and then Forrest Brock comes in again. Like, a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, very well said. Our buddy Andrew Goldstein just literally texted me 2 seconds ago, which he loves to do with names. Is Holden Pierre-Louis related to Nate Pierre-Louis? He's referring to the walk-on forward on the men's basketball team. Andrew loves names, and he will actually bend.
I mean, I
similar
don't think
names.
that's like a joke. Like, when he committed, I think that was. I spent time trying to figure out if that was the case, and I believe it.
He would say stuff to me like, "Is Edward James almost related to Sergio Almost in the past?" So it's a part of an ongoing. This
could also be a legitimate. Like, there was the possibility of that.
Yes. No, Andrew, they are not.
I believe it's just a fairly common. Last name.
Yes, but I love that. Last question here, and here's where we're weaving in some baseball from our friend Sam Foreman, Storm and Foreman on Twitter. 3-part question here. Question number 1: Is this how it felt in the pre-Al Golden era? My first 2 years were 2012 and 2013, but it never felt this dire. I know this sounds like the cop-out answer, but different time, different era. The pre-Golden era was this program was nearly dropped a couple of years before, and the facilities were still not as solid as they are now. And Al Golden was coming in to be a culture changer and a program fixer and the CEO and this guy who'd read leadership books and was literally hitting the reset button and reprogramming this program from the studs. Like just it was a complete rebuild, changing the culture and all that stuff. So it's a different time, and that now the challenges are again Temple is not does not even compare favorably with their conference peers on NIL. We talked about that last week. You can see it if they had decent NIL resources, they might have been able to pull the trigger on a another quarterback. As I think about this and flesh this out, with Al Golden, there was this sense of like, finally, okay, the trustees have committed to keeping the program, and you're bringing in a guy with energy and a football pedigree who's up for the challenge. And you may lose him at some point if he does his job, but Al Golden was the guy that was involved with everything, like how the media guide looked, how he did press conferences. It's a different time. It's just a different comparison. The pre-Golden era, and again, pre-Golden era is Bobby Wallace. So pre-Golden era, and I'm kind of blending the two eras together here. I realize that pre-Golden era, yeah, it was bad, but you got the sense that, okay, there's going to be some sort of inflection point where like they're either going to keep the program or get rid of it. But the pre-Golden era was Bobby Wallace, and they were, taking guys that back then Bobby Wallace was not even able to guarantee recruits that they were going to be around for 4 years as a program. So he took a lot of JUCO guys. They weren't all academically ready to be a Temple. They had the scholarship hit through the APR stuff. So it's different. I don't know. I mean, I was around for that. Kyle, I know you were still in junior high. Right?
I was wearing hemp bracelets and trying to get girls to look at me. Like that's actually
It's a different kind of struggle, right?
I wore a hemp belt.
Beltless.
But yeah, it feels different. Like I mean, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really there, but like my understanding of it is I feel like it's a bit of a different scenario. It's kind of, I know this is also, I speak in a lot of cliches. It's kind of a unique situation because this doesn't feel like the Rod Carey era either. Like it just feels like its own kind of situation of what they are trying might not necessarily be working, but I'm still an optimist in the sense that I don't think it's impossible to win at Temple.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's possible. I just think that whether it's this staff, a future staff, or a past staff, they need to be creative in the way they go about doing it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think was the case. Like, yeah, like Golden needed to be creative in the sense that he needed to take flyers and guys that had academic issues or maybe off the field issues and kind of like nurture them. But like he had a blueprint, right? And like he knew his whole thing was he had his little binder and he had his plan. He knew exactly what he was going to do to the T. I think in 2024 Temple football, that playbook wouldn't work in 2024. That I think whoever is going to be successful at Temple needs to be really creative on how to be successful.
Yeah.
And if I knew what that entailed, I'd be running this program into the dirt. There would be recruiting violations out the ass. Head coach guys. I also think something that makes it different is that people care more now, I think.
Yes.
Because like I think, again, I wasn't there, but Al Golden took over a program that hadn't won in 20 years. Like they hadn't done anything in 20 years. And there's still people now that, for better or for worse, think that Temple can just flip a switch and beat 2015, 2016 Temple again all over. And like that might have just been lightning in a bottle, but it's still fresh enough that I think that there's people that are very vocal on social media about what they think about Temple athletics. And that might not have been the case if social media had existed in 2005, 2006.
Yeah. Yeah. Second part of Storm Informant's question here on Twitter was whoever took the football job after the last guy doomed to fail. Why or why not? Kyle, I'll start with you on this one.
Doomed to fail, no. Doomed to like stumble, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's called Al Golden. I think Rod Carey really did leave the cupboard bare in a lot of key positions that aren't as easy to flip the switch. I think that Stan Drayton probably could have come in and embraced the transfer portal a little better than he did initially and like kind of hit on things more, like sure. But outside of you hiring I don't know, a Sunbelt coach who was going to bring his entire staff and bring his entire roster with him and just have this like known system, this known commodity, I think there was going to be a hiccup regardless. But no, I don't think they were destined to fail. I don't think anybody's destined to fail. I mean, you see UConn went from 0 wins to 6 wins there in Jim Mora. Now they're kind of struggling again, but like they had that initial bump, but didn't work out for Temple.
Kyle and I, Declan and I were talking about this a little bit last week. Like you could have looked at that from both ways. Like after Rod Carey, he was the guy who came in after you had Al Golden, then Steve Adazio. Steve Adazio, like Rod Carey, never understood Temple, never wanted to understand Temple, was clearly using it. All these guys went on to different jobs, but you can clearly say that Al Golden gave everything he had to this place in 5 years. Matt Rule, same thing. Steve Adazio is Steve Adazio. I had one good season. The Steve Adazio and Rod Carey tenures are similar. Only one of them had to deal with COVID, but they had at least one season of success. One won a ball game, one went to a ball game, but neither one of them ever really wanted to truly embrace. They kind of looked at Temple as like, this is kind of like a necessary evil on my resume, whereas Al and Matt, this place is still in their blood. I will still hear from them every once in a while about like how they care about this place.
You're
But
telling me Steve Adazio, you don't hear from him anymore?
no, I can't say I do. Same thing for Rod, but like those whoever was going to come in here, I think after Rod Carey, I think again there were a lot of people who wanted Fran Brown. Well, yeah, we can go back and forth on that, but Fran wanted this job twice over. They passed over him twice. When Stan came in, I think people weren't surprised because there was the Texas connection. I think depending on which fan or which segment of the fan base you talk to, you thought, okay, maybe it's not an awful thing that he's coming in as a position coach and he's not a sitting head coach who's bringing his entire staff over with him. Because when Rod brought most of his staff over from Northern Illinois, Kyle, what was the first concern about that?
They had no connections to the area.
Yeah, no connections to the area, no recruiting connections to the area. And it was kind of an odd fit, but it was coming off the whole Manny Diaz thing. So I agree with Kyle. I don't think they were doomed to fail, but they were doomed to struggle at first. I don't think I'm putting him in a bad position when I say this. A couple of years ago at the spring game, guys like Tyler Matakevich, Matt Ioannidis were in town. And I was just talking. I spent like pretty much the entire second half talking to those guys. And I was talking to Matt Ioannidis. He looks at me, kind of taps me on the arm. He goes, I hope this isn't a dumb question, but this is the team, right? Like, are they holding a lot of guys out of the game? Not really. They've got some injuries. He's like, they look small. It's like they are. They said they did not. And I'm not saying that anybody would have expected Stan Drayton to come in and bring in 6 JUCO All-Americans. Or again, like 5-star offensive linemen are not coming to Temple unless, like I said last week, you get some guy who is bequeathing like billions of dollars to Temple football. But yeah, I mean, Rod Carey did not recruit well, and a guy who had played here at Temple and recently retired and had a fairly successful, albeit a little bit on the shorter side, career in the NFL. They know what they see. And Matt Ioannidis, the first thing was like, they look small. They look small on the lines. They do not look ready. So the next guy was doomed to struggle. I think that's a good way of how Kyle put it. So why or why not? Yeah, I mean, like they were doomed to struggle because of the condition that the program was left in. Third question for Kyle. Johnny hits some baseball talk here. Maybe you want to jump in as well. For Kyle Gall, should the Braves rest core position players more often?
Do they have anybody to rest? Like they're starting 3 position players that got cut by other teams this year, in Laureano or Ursula and Whit Merrifield. So like no, like I think they have to just roll out who they have. You hope Ozzy Albies is gonna hit exclusively right-handed going forward because that doesn't hurt him. But yeah, I mean they're in a dogfight. It all comes down to next week we play the Mets, unless the Mets and they just completely crap the bed between now and then.
Well, I think I thought I took the question as more like going forward, like next year whenever.
Oh,
that's how I took the question.
Well, like
not let's rest you or
so.
Joe.
I mean, let's look at what happened. Like Acuna, fluke. Like I don't think that was a overuse thing. I think that's him just like it wasn't the same knee. Ozzy Albies fluke. He goes to make a tag and he breaks his finger. And then Austin Riley gets hit in the hand. Like I don't know if it was necessarily like rest, like things that rest would have prevented. Yeah, and then they're resting Lopez. He's not a position player, but they're resting Lopez down the stretch. I don't know. They are snake bitten. I'm kind of at the point where it's like, look, if they make the playoffs, I think they have good enough pitching that they can steal a series or two if their bats get hot. Like I do still think that's the case. Or if they don't make the playoffs, I can easily write it off to myself as like no team can overcome the amount of injuries that they overcame.
I
But they're
still
still in it.
I'm dealing with 90s Braves trauma, so they still scare the hell out of me, and this would be an incredible storyline of like how many years. Yes, they eventually they got a World Series recently, but how many years did they get there and not win? And this is set up perfectly for them to say, look at what they overcame, and they got hot at the right time, and despite all these key injuries, they win the World Series.
All I'm saying is, to your point, people tend to look back at those 90s Braves like, oh, they only won one. The Braves have won 2 World Series since 95.
Oh no,
Phillies have won 2 since 80. Like,
oh no, I'm just saying they eventually start to get criticized for getting there, not winning, but they've been a dominant franchise. They scare the hell out of me.
they have good pitching still. I still like, especially in like an NLDS where you're just gonna be able to roll out like Chris Sale, Max Fried, and whether it's Charlie Morton or Reynaldo Lopez or even Spencer Swallenbach, like I'll put that rotation up against anybody in the bigs this year. Also, baseball is just like this year, there's no dominant team. None.
No.
Like I think the Phillies team that went to the World Series 2 years ago is a significantly better team than this year's Phillies team, but I think this year's Phillies team has a better chance of winning it all than that team did 2 years ago. Like
Why
I think
say
it's
that?
just like because the rest of the league is not as good.
Okay.
So like there's no dominant team.
You really think the team from 2 years ago is more dominant than the one this year?
It's the exact same
pitching
team,
staff?
just 2 years younger. It's
They
the
have a
exact
completely
same
different
team.
pitching staff. Other than Wheeler and Nola,
Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Like it's the same shit. Like you just rolled out there. Other than the guys are going to pitch 60% of the starting pitching innings, it's the same. Like if anything,
bullpen's also
if-
completely
to
different.
that other
than
point,
Jose Alvarado.
Suarez has sucked for the last 2.5 months. Sanchez until yesterday had sucked for the last 2.5 months. Like
Sanchez has been one of the best pitchers in the NL this month.
not at all.
This
You got
month,
you,
in the
you gotta
the
look.
end of his last late 3 or 4 starts, he's been dominant.
Oh, okay. Again, you're leaving out half this crap. If you look out the start he made right before the All-Star break through September 4th, so 2 straight months of seasons, his ERA was 5. 2 straight months of starts, his ERA was 5. He was not good post.
Look at his splits at home versus on the road.
Do the games not just is he just not going to pitch on the road? Is that just not an option in
But
baseball?
there's the argument of him
You
starting
can Roger
game-
Clemens in and just say I'm only making home starts.
No,
like-
but you start him in game 2 of an NLDS, so then you have Nola on the road. Is what the argument
Yeah,
would be.
that's early on stuff though. Eventually, if you think they're going to advance, you're not going to be able to manipulate that rotation to the point. He's going to have to make a road start.
I mean, yeah. But you could also frame it in a way where he doesn't have to make as many.
Sure. But
which
my
he just
point
does.
to your point though, when you said, do you think that team 2 years ago is better than this year's team?
That bullpen now is way better than the one 2 years ago.
Even that, so yes, for sure. But also like they had a really hot start and have kind of like come back a little bit too. I'm just saying if the Braves were at full strength, I wouldn't be as scared of this Phillies team as I was 2 years ago. Harper has to choke up in little league swing now because just a shell like it is physically not fully healthy. Like I don't have a guy on that lineup that scares me as much as like 2022 Harper.
We'll see.
That being said,
Spirited.
as a Braves fan, if they run into him, Castellanos will hit 6 fucking homers against them, and then that will be that.
Well, spirited baseball talk to close things out. So thank you all for joining us for another episode. We'll be back next week to talk about whatever the heck happens at this 2 p.m. kickoff between Temple and Utah State. Have more recruiting updates for you on the basketball front, and I hope you guys all have a great week, and we will talk to you soon.